Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Big Apple's CoRe podcast. My name is Jack Maseka from the Advanced Group. I'll be your host today. And today I'm joined by Nick Bornheimer from Allsteel and Wanda Dunaway from Carvart, and they are the co-editors-in-chief of the CoreNet New York Insight digital publication. Another episode, or I should say edition, just dropped. Congratulations on that, and thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, it's really a pleasure. And, you know, we're all part of the marketing committee today, and we were talking about it before. We all do so much for our publications to come together between the podcast and the Insight, and it takes a ton of work, and we'll talk about it today. But what I wanted to talk about first is, first and foremost, you guys do such a good job with this. It's really, really well done between the articles, the thought that's put into it, the creative aspect of all of the artwork that goes behind it and stuff like that. You guys do a really good job. And I thought the topic of this edition, with it being then and now, was really so well done too. And like, I'd imagine so well received because it talks about nostalgia and, different aspects of the city and how far they've come and things like that. And where did you guys get that inspiration from, for this edition?
You want to start?
Sure. So every issue we start with a brainstorming session, and we have different topics that come up. And some issues we have a ton of topics and we just can't narrow down easily. Sometimes we have struggled to find one, but this one really just came together pretty quickly. We threw out nostalgia and everybody just got really excited about it. And so that's how it started. And then as we started to think about it a little more, we said, well, nostalgia might be a little too maybe depressing, not maybe all positive. So we decided to move to then and now with nostalgia as part of that.
Yeah, and see, that is the funny aspect of nostalgia, because as it mentions in that article, I think it was the psychology of nostalgia. And remind me, who was the author on that? Michelle?
You're looking at the author right here.
Oh, well, so I was the author, Wanda was the author, and then I was interviewing Michelle Nealon.
Right, correct. That's right. She was really good too with some of her thoughts, and then the history behind it that you put behind it in terms of the origin of the word nostalgia was initially a negative connotation, which is really interesting because when we think of nostalgia, we think it as, fonder memories of a time where, it was just happier times. And although that might not always be the case, that's our mind playing tricks on us a little bit. Whereas, you used a reference in the article, pumping gas, because we're going to go
Right.
to electric cars and, people are going to say, oh, I remember the days of pumping gas and how nice it is. And not really. So when you're putting that article together, what's it like for you? And first of all, how did you find Michelle? Because she did a great job. And what's that process like for you when you're developing that article?
Sure. So for one of the things I learned from it is I had no idea that nostalgia was a demonic possession at one point, but that's one thing I learned in the research. So when we're trying to find our sources, we have a lot of different things. We reach out to family and friends, industry colleagues. I'm a member of a network it's a women's network called Chief. And so for this particular instance, I put out a plea on the Chief app and said, I'm looking for someone who can talk about the psychology of nostalgia. And I got several replies, and Michelle was a great interviewee. She knew so much about nostalgia. And so that's how that came about. And just a plug, we're always looking for volunteers to help us find interviewees. So even if you're not a writer, if you're not an editor, if you're just a good connector, we'd love to have you as part of our Insight Committee.
Yeah, and see, that's a lot of what goes into it too, because again, you guys have to storyboard this from go very macro with it and then make it micro, which is really cool. And then Nick, you worked on the Tenement Museum article, correct?
So we all took a kind of a piece in helping our writers put the articles together and doing some editing. So Wanda and I Wanda specifically wrote the nostalgia article, but we all had a hand in helping our writers do some editing. Kate Kennedy was the writer who worked on the Tenement Museum, and yeah, she did a cool kind of out of the box, or took a cool kind of out of the box approach where she went on a tour of the Tenement Museum, spoke to some of the folks there, and just got an immersive experience about what immigration into New York City and through Ellis Island looked like. So that was a really profound kind of way to look at it then versus now.
You know
type
what?
of approach.
Exactly. And it's that interesting. And I'm sorry, I positioned that wrong in the sense that I knew Kate wrote that article. I spoke to her about it yesterday. I know Kate well, and she did a great job on that article, painting that picture, because that's also the interesting concept of this edition is the then and now, and like the I don't want to say issues, for lack of a better term, issues or the struggles that we as humans deal with, hundreds of years ago at this time now. My family came here about 100 years ago from Italy, and, they were in the Lower East Side for a long time, not so much in the tenement area, but, the struggles that we see then are the same we see today. I mean, we're dealing with like immigrants getting bussed up from Texas right now. And like, it's so fascinating, and this is a little off topic, but I've always seen that in history, in New York history in general, which makes this place specifically such a beautiful case study for, the history and present and nostalgia and things like that. Kate did a really good job of painting those pictures and kind of setting it up in such a way where it's impactful. You can feel the presence, although it is a long time ago. There's a sense of nostalgia in it, where you can get the sense of what people went through, really just trying to provide better lives for their families too.
Sure.
Which is really, really interesting. I kind of wanted to get back on something nostalgic too, which is going to be interesting to us and like the transition we've seen in the last few years as far as the office space. And like, a lot of people aren't really in the office, 5 days a week anymore. And even when you are in, there's only maybe 50% of the people in there. And do you think in like, 10 or 15 years, Nick, and again, you're in furniture and stuff like that. Do you think we're going to look back and be like, man, it was really nice being in office 5 days and having that whole office community and workplace community?
Yeah, I think it's without question there'll be some elements of that. We even see it now over the course of the last year or two, where people are longing for that the sort of like unanticipated or unplanned connection points in the office. And it's easy to get into your routine, and maybe you get certain tasks done better at home versus being in the office. But there is really something about, and for the younger generation to be able to run into their coworkers or get time with their boss that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. I think that's like, those are invaluable experiences and stuff that the younger folks, the Gen Zers, might not have the same ability to experience that you otherwise would. So I don't know, I can almost see the nostalgia playing out in lifetime. Wanda, I don't know what you think about
Wanda,
it.
what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know that we'll ever be back to everybody in the office 5 days a week, because we've learned we don't have to do that. But I think for my team at least, is I find that I'm more productive at home because I'm not getting interrupted as much, but I'm more collaborative in the office. So for my team, that's something we talk about, and we have to have a blend of it. And so we, my company right now is a 3 in the office, 2 at home, and that works really well because you get that blend of productivity and collaboration, which I think we really need.
Yeah. We'll be like our grandparents when they used to say, back in my day, I used to walk uphill both ways to school. We'll be like, back in my day, we were in the office 5 days a week at 9 a.m. sharp. And,
absolutely.
that was real work, right? But anyways, getting back to the topics at hand, and again, with everything going on, the illustrations, I wanted to give a shout out to the woman who did that, Alexandra Bistech.
It's actually Cecile Rothschild.
Oh, okay.
She is our graphic designer, and she does a magnificent job. We will start with talking with her about the theme. we'll give her some ideas about the articles. And then where she really has a lot of fun, I think, though, is with the fun facts, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to reference with, the cost of pizza and the subway card and stuff like that. What's that like for you guys? How are you guys brainstorming that or working on that? Does she come to you guys with that type of stuff or?
Yeah.
Melissa started that, right?
Yes. So we have depending on how we work our way through each issue, and Wanda kind of alluded to this earlier, there's no really like finite or like direct rubric to the way that we do it. It's an ever-changing type of iterative process. So we charged one of our writers and editors with coming up with some topics this time as it relates to the theme of the issue. So we just looked at, in decades past, what certain things cost in New York and how and with pizza and with subways, and it was just something that we found to be relatable, even if you weren't in New York at the time, because you could still place yourself there and kind of think about, wow, like if rent really was that, then like what could I have done in the city, and just seeing how out of proportion certain things have gotten. But it's cool because we don't have to have the idea of the fun facts right off the bat. Like when we're going through those first meetings, things sort of happen upon us as we're writing, or as certain articles take form, and then maybe we meet somebody along the way who's got some good ideas. So that was Melissa, who's one of our writers, who helped really form that, and then Cecile brought some of it to life, and will even do her own research and say like, hey, this was cool, like look what else I found, and sent along an article, and then I can generate some images based on that. So it's a real collaborative effort.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, and it was fun because we started off with maybe some subway tokens and something else, and then I don't know if it was you or Alex that came up with Pizza Rat, or maybe Courtney. I don't know. We were all on the call, and we're like, "What about Pizza Rat?" And it turned out beautifully.
Wow, Courtney.
I mean, beautiful. Yeah. Maybe beautiful's not the right word.
Yeah, it might have been Alex.
Might have been Alex Patesh. Yeah.
She's our creative director.
Right.
So she helped kind of bring insight into. Yeah, sorry, I'll talk on the microphone. Sort of brought what this new iterative process for what insight looks like today. She helped it really like form.
Yeah.
So while Wanda and I are the co-editors in chief, she helps a lot from the background as well. So she'll come up with cool ideas every once in a while and jump on a call here and there. We bring and welcome all different ideas.
Yeah, that's great. And I got to ask, whose idea was it for the North Fork Nostalgia? Because that was so specific.
Sure.
And really cool, though.
Yeah.
I was going to try to watch the film before this interview, but I got caught in New York Giants Monday Night Football last night.
Yeah. Yeah.
But did you help out with that one?
Yeah. Nick? So it was, Brittany is, she's a really talented writer and is getting a lot more into film and trying to do some different things in that space. So she had a connection with this costume designer that helped out. The costume designer had done stuff on a handful of different sets, New York City specific sets. And she reached out to me, Brittany did, about like, well, maybe this could be a good idea if you know anybody. And I threw out a couple names, and she's like, oh, wait, duh, I've got this really incredible connection. And she also worked on this movie that is like so on the nose, perfect for this episode. I'm like, well, there you go. You don't really even need my help anymore. And was able to get really, really cool access to the film's directors, got to get inside their minds and understand how, like what the motel that they shot within and got to like stay within during COVID meant to bringing the movie and then subsequently her piece to life.
Yeah.
That was pretty much all her, and then helped here and there with a couple things. But that article turned out really cool. It
was, because there was, like you mentioned, twofold to it, where obviously there was the nostalgia of the director, and it was his friend or someone of the sorts who he was involved in making films with, who would stay at the Sand Isles?
the name of it is it's escaping me right now, but I'll think of it in a second.
Yeah, something along those lines on the North Fork. And they would stay out there, and they had thought to themselves, why have we made a movie out there? And the fact that they made it where the like overarching, I guess the plot device was Watergate, but there was something much more going on within it. And the concept of nostalgia being the Watergate issue brings so many people back to that time. But all the while, there's another story going on that was related to Watergate, and I don't want to give it away. Read the article.
Sure.
But yeah, it was really, really cool how she did that. That was Brittany Greer, correct? Was her name? Yeah. She did a really good job.
Yeah, and one thing that was cool also was that the way it was formatted, it went by dates. So sort of here's the date, and it goes through. And we try to do a little different things with different articles. So one article may just be a interview, and it's a fully written with some quotes from the person. But some, like last issue, not episode, we did one on a TikTok influencer.
Right.
And we did Q&A, and I said, I'm not touching her answers because she's a 19, 20-year-old person. And if she uses 3 exclamation points, we want to keep that.
Absolutely.
We want to keep that energy and all that. But other articles lend themselves more to an article or a timeline or whatever that looks like.
Yeah, and that's true too. You want to keep that authenticity, in the interview or article as much as you can. And again, Brittany did a really good job of that. And you guys also had the student spotlight in this episode. She was a very impressive young lady. Really did a lot of cool things. There was also, the articles in terms of supplier diversity then and now, which again, when you use history to educate you on the present, right? So you don't constantly make the same mistakes over and over again. And there's a really good quote, I wish I could remember it, as far as like, man constantly making the same mistakes over and over, but
sure.
Whatever. Maybe we'll clip that in. But it's fascinating to see. And like one of the things in that supplier diversity article that was mentioned, and it's still sort of the case, but again, now that a lot of companies, especially larger companies, are working to bring on more diverse suppliers, is it was always based on like who you used last time, did they do a good job? If they did a good job, we'll get them again. There was also financial stability that was included in there. The concept that immigrants are sometimes looked at as less reliable in some cases, and now we've learned to just tinker with those a little bit. And that can go a long way, as far as giving new opportunities. Mm-hmm. What was it like working on that article, Nick?
Yeah. So it's you hit a couple key points there where people of the past, and you still see it bleed through into today. They're operating with a preconception where there's a more limited pool that they think that they have to work within. So it's about who, like you said, who have I worked with in the past, and well, let's just wash, rinse, repeat, keep going that way to satisfy a certain need that or to tick a metric that you might have to, but that it shouldn't just be about doing that about ticking a box in order to satisfy a certain metric. It's with this bringing more diversity and more outside the box thinking into business, it's proven that you're going to see better, different, and a more well-rounded type of result.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the most important things I've learned, working in diverse like groups and projects and stuff like that, is when you have a diverse group working together, you get so many different points of views that offers so much more just productivity and impact to the project as a whole. It works out really well. So I've seen that firsthand, and it's nice to see like this. It's twofold: the thinking then and how it wasn't necessarily like, I don't want to say wrong,
sure,
but it was just the framework that we had always thought in, and we had never really thought outside those boxes. So to work on that, and to see that and then improve on it, is certainly, it's good to see. And, again, that interview was done very, very well.
Yeah, that was and I'll just mention real quick, Jennifer took a different approach with that one too, where she helped facilitate the interview, but she brought in 2 industry experts to sort of have a conversation
Yeah.
about it. And what kind of built out of that conversation was the really cool piece that ended up being put together. So yeah, there's not one form or fashion that these articles will come together in. The writers can take some different liberties based on the content of, you know, what they're trying to get across, and it'll take form however it does.
Yeah. And that's actually what I wanted to get to next, because again, you know, I've said it tenfold in this conversation. The articles and how they're put together, there's a level of creativity, you know, information that's provided, and fun that you guys have, you know, with the articles, you know, on the basis of the template of the edition that you're creating. What's the typical timeline? Because I know you guys do 1 a quarter, right?
Actually, 2 a year.
2 a year.
Right.
Yeah. So it's about a 6-month process to really create that from start to finish. Can you, I guess, and you know, as macro as possible, or you know, within a time frame, because I'm sure you could explain it for a long time, but you know, what is that process like in terms of from start to publication?
Yeah, and one thing to note is this was mine and Nick's first editor-in-chief issue.
You did a great job.
Thanks. So this was a somewhat new process, not completely. So Rebecca Fielding was an amazing editor before us. She mentored us and then tossed it to us. So, but we basically, we had our kickoff, our brainstorming, said everybody go out and think about this. You know, we send notes out, and then we were big fans of using Google Docs to basically keep everything in one place, making sure we had the latest and greatest article. But we meet once a week. Sometimes it's for 30 minutes, sometimes it's for 5 minutes, just if people need to check in. I think Kate and I just did a working session one time because she was trying to figure out which way to go with her article. And it took a little longer on this one because we realized we were in July and we're just like, or actually we were in August and we're like, we don't really want to put this out before Labor Day because it's going to get lost in the shuffle.
Definitely.
So we decided to delay it a week or so for that. But yeah, it's about a 6-month process, and from start to finish. And it's writing, it's interviewing, writing, editing, working on the graphics, and then editing more, and then editing more. And you can never edit enough. There's always going to be something, right?
Yeah, and we kind of understand and sympathize with, we're all doing this on a volunteer basis, right? So while we produce some, I think our writers did an incredible job this time through. You don't want to force the process or truncate things unnecessarily. If we have the time to build things out, we should take however much time we need. One thing Wanda and I think did a pretty good job of, and we'll continue to build on this, is hold people accountable to certain deadlines, because we're giving you enough time, and we now know like how long that editing process can really take. So getting interviews scheduled and trying to have them scheduled by this time. Having gone through this as writers in the past, when you're only responsible for your thing, you can say like, well, I know how fast I can write this. I know based on the time I have during this week, and I've got more freedom or a freer schedule. It's more difficult when you're trying to corral everyone. So keeping those little benchmarks in place are super helpful. And it's inevitably going to push out a little bit sometimes with certain pieces, but you go with the flow.
Yeah, you get a general sense of it. And is it almost like has you guys seen the movie Spotlight?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's like you put, certain writers like on the beat, and like, this is what you, and I'm sure you had that discussion with them first, like with Kate, for example, with the Tenement Museum. Like, how does that idea come to fruition? Like, obviously the Tenement Museum is, a famous museum where you can go back in time, so it makes sense. But, how do you get there? And you mentioned you had a working session too. Mm-hmm. What does that look like on that?
Well, and I think Kate's original idea was to interview people at the museum and talk through them. And then as we were talking through, we came up with the idea, and it was Kate's idea, is to say, hey, let's, instead of just interviewing them, let's do a tour of it and then write about it. And I thought it was a great idea. It worked out really well. So, but you don't always finish with the idea you started with. Actually, if I think about it, I don't think supplier diversity started out as supplier diversity. It started out with industry legends, and that topic fell out of it. So there's lots of things that change as we go, but the Tennant Museum definitely changed because it wasn't planned to be just a tour, but it ended up being really fantastic.
Yeah, and I hope the people at the Tennant Museum get to read it, because it's a great puff piece for the museum as a whole. It makes me want to go.
Sure. Yeah, and Brittany's article was born out of this idea of wanting to look back at older set design and costume design, and it kind of grew into something. Silver Sands was the name of the motel. Yeah, I had to look that up. And it grew into a piece about this movie, but there were these ancillary ideas and kind of like subplots within the article that it came together really nice. So to Wanda's point that she just made, it rarely finishes out the way that it initially started. You kind of let the article and the interviewer and whatever the narrative is kind of take you in a certain direction, and don't hold yourself beholden to one specific way of thinking.
Yeah.
And also with the schedule you talked about, is we had, I think my article and Kate's were ready a little earlier because our interviewees were able to be there.
Yeah.
And Brittany needed a little extra time, so it worked out great because we could go ahead and send the first articles in for editing, wait on the others because we couldn't get to them yet anyway. So there's an ebb and flow to it.
Right. So that's going to actually lead me to my next question. Considering this was your first edition that you edited, were the chief editors on, what was your biggest lesson, Wanda?
Biggest lesson was really to map out the editing time that was needed. I think that was there. It just takes a while.
Yeah.
And because as Nick said, it's not our day job. And so one thing we'll do is definitely make sure that there's weekends within that editing schedule, so that if we can't do it during the day or at night, you can get it during the weekend. Because most of the time it's like, okay, I can get to it this weekend, right?
Yeah.
So that would be mine, is adding those in.
Nick, what would you say?
Yeah, mine sort of orbits around that idea as well. It's, you can never get too many eyes on any particular piece. Wanda and I were actually talking ahead of recording this, and when you could read something 15, 20 times, but if your mind is already taking in or consuming what it thinks it's supposed to, it's going to read that typo the way that you think it sounds in your head.
Right.
So unless you get a fresh set of eyes on it, you're not going to get, a totally unbiased opinion. Because I'll do that all the time when I try to self-edit. Even like if I'm writing like a work email, I'll read it back after the fact. I'm like, why? I know that's not how you.
I did that the other day.
You know what I mean? You just need to step away from it from time to time. That's what's nice about giving ourselves some more time to be able to work over a 4 or 5 month span, is step away from something for a little bit, come back to it.
Yeah.
Don't try to force it all into a specific window, because that's when more mistakes get made.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's all part of the creative process too. It's like there's so many different aspects that we've talked today, from obviously the production of an article or a piece, into the creative aspect of it and illustrating it and editing. There's so many different pieces. So to walk away from it, and just let it breathe for a second, and then you can come back and refine it however you see fit. So I just had one more question, and then we're going to get into a segment that I renamed. Speaking of, the creative process, we're going to do something a little different on the next segment, so I'll need Courtney's help. What's the one thing you learned personally from this article? Nick or Wanda, you want to start first?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things was just how much immigration policy has shaped the neighborhoods in New York City. Probably across the country, but definitely in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and I thought it was also very interesting how that subway fares and the price of a slice of pizza in New York just married up
Yeah.
almost exactly.
I know,
So
isn't that?
those were my two things that were lessons for me.
Yeah.
Mine actually comes from the article that Wanda put together. I never really understood what nostalgia was holistically and why I felt a certain way about things. And it's still a little like, in the eye of the beholder, but it put me into like a little rabbit hole where I started researching things and what was I conflating with like this moment in time and this song.
Right.
Like, was it actually that the song was bringing me joy? Was it that I listened to it so many times it just reminds me of this moment in time? And I thought it was cool to kind of look back on some of that stuff and think about why. All right, what is it? This certain smell reminds me of being up north or something, or this photograph takes me to a certain time, and maybe it was, not all the way good, but your brain wants it to be all the way good. So
Right.
I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the same for me. I really enjoyed that article regarding the psychology of nostalgia. It was just because nostalgia is such a funny thing that it's part of the human experience. And to look into the psychology of it and its origins, like I mentioned before, and then how it's been developed to mean different things over time, and then how it's a coping mechanism for us, and especially like, through the pandemic, like that's a massive one.
Oh, yeah.
So
Therapeutic.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And, and even coming out of it, it's so interesting. And as you get older, like it helps you kind of just maintain optimism of the future, which it mentions in that article too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really, really cool. So, we're going to do our segment, but, before we do that, I just want to say thank you guys again. You guys did a really, really phenomenal job on the article. And I'm very impressed, since I've become involved in the marketing committee through the podcast, I've certainly paid a lot more attention to insights, and you guys did a great job. So I hope you get a lot of good feedback on that, and can continue to grow with it. Any preview for the next one yet?
Thanks on that.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
No preview yet. We haven't had our brainstorming meeting, but I will say something else I learned is it's great to have a co-editor because
Yeah,
Rebecca was doing
ditto.
this on her own, and I think what happened is Rebecca asked me and Nick both at the time, and we both said, we'll do it if the other one does it.
Yeah.
So it's worked out great, and
Without
we love.
question.
Yeah, so that's been really helpful to not do it on our own, and then also Courtney Grill has been fantastic to help us too.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works on this podcast too. I'm like technically the executive producer, but Courtney like does a ton too. So we're definitely co-executive
And she
producers
looks so
on
cute
this.
in the headphones.
Yeah. If only you could see her on camera.
Right, yeah, exactly. She's behind the camera this time. All right, so we have a new segment that we're working on. It's called the New York Minute, where our guests get 1 minute to answer rapid fire questions. So for you two, since we're doing it with two guests to start, Nick, we'll start with you,
Okay.
and then Wanda, you can ask next, and we'll do a minute.
All right.
Rapid fire
Let's do
questions.
it.
So I'll start the timer now, and here we go. Nick, favorite way to get around the city?
I'm a subway kid through and through. L train in the city. I live in Williamsburg. I always say subway.
Wanda?
Definitely walk or subway. I'm not a car person.
Yeah, no, cars stink in New York City. You get there faster walking.
Yeah,
And absolutely the fastest on the subway.
Yep.
If you could go back and tell your 18-year-old self one thing, what would you say?
I had to think about this one for a little bit, but I think I would say see things through, even if at the time it seems wildly unnecessary. And maybe it turns out to be unnecessary, but there's something about seeing something through that I wish I would have better realized when I was younger.
Like it.
I would say build a network. I found out early on that who you knew helped a lot, and you can build that network, which we talked about in the supplier diversity.
Absolutely.
So that's something I would tell my 18-year-old self, build a network.
Love it. Favorite bar in the city?
So this brings in some nostalgia, funny enough, but the first bar I ever went to, the Spring Lounge in Nolita, I don't go there often anymore, and it skews younger than, I am now, but it'll always hold a soft place in my heart.
Love it.
I don't go to a lot of bars, but I would say the one we end up the most is Carmine Street Beers.
Oh, yeah,
if
okay.
if that classifies as a bar,
Yeah,
that's just a
we'll
great
take
place
it.
to kind of chill a little bit, have a nice microbrew.
Love it. And that's a minute. I think it was a minute 30, but we'll take it. Great. So thank you guys again for coming on. You know, this is great. We work together as part of the marketing committee, but we never get a chance to really sit down like this. So I appreciate you guys coming out. We appreciate it as a podcast committee. And again, great job on the edition of Insights Then and Now, released last week. If you haven't taken a look at it yet, you know, please do. It was really well put together. And, you know, looking forward to the next edition soon.
Thanks so much, Jack.
Thank you. We really appreciate this.
My pleasure. And thanks, everybody, for listening. Looking forward to another episode soon.